Do you wish you were friendly with Lynch?
You know, I know George a little bit. I've hung out with him on probably half a dozen occasions.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think that he knows me by name? No, I don't. But I have talked to him face to face on a few occasions. It was really weird. Let me tell you a quick story.
All right.
Back in, what was it, 2000 and I want to say 2005, probably about 10 years ago.
Okay.
I flew out to LA. I went to the Key Club.
Okay.
And they were doing that whole release for that Hollywood Rocks box set. Remember that?
Right.
Cleopatra was doing that whole release, and they had this box set. It was called Hollywood Rocks.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's a 4 CD set.
Yeah, we gave one away on the show, didn't we?
I think we did, but I have one here in the studio.
Yeah, maybe that's the one we gave away.
No, I got that one. That one was sent to me, but I have it here up on the shelf.
Right.
So I went to L.A. and I hooked up with Nader.
Okay.
And Nader and I and let's see, who else was there? Ricky Rackman was there.
Okay.
And we were all sitting, and Odin performed, and who else was there? Trying to think. Some of the people from this Hollywood Rocks thing, they all performed that night.
Okay.
And so me,
bands.
yeah. So Nader and I, and that was the night I got to meet Kim Fowley.
Oh yeah.
Who passed away recently. He died of cancer or something.
Right.
You know, he was the producer of The Runaways.
Mm-hmm.
But he produced that Don't Cry Wolf for London.
Right.
And he was there. I met him just briefly just to say hello and how are you and nice to meet you, that kind of shit.
Right.
He was there, and there was just a bunch of people there. So Nader and I and several people were kind of hanging out at there, and George was there.
Okay.
And again, this was when George was still promoting this whole Dokken reunion. I mean, it was all about Dokken.
What was this, last week?
No. He's been promoting this for 10 years, dude.
I know.
There's going to be a Dokken reunion there. So he was up at this bar, right?
Right.
So I walked up there to order some drinks for me and Nader, and a couple other people were hanging out, and George was there. And I walked up and I said hello to George, and we got into talking, and I told him who I was. Oh, yeah, dude. I know you. You know, I've been on your show, and, so on and so forth. He goes, there's going to be a Dokken reunion.
And you're like, yeah.
and he just started just blabbering shit,
Sure.
So right after that, I started texting Dawn. I said, you're not going to believe it. I'm down here at the Key Club.
Right.
I ran into George, and he's spouting that there's going to be this Dokken reunion. And Don texts me back. He's just like, oh, really? He says, where can I get the tickets? I need to get in line and get one of those. I want to see this thing,
Nice.
But it's just kind of funny because I've run into George, like I said, at least a half a dozen times over the years.
Right.
And he's always been cordial and nice to me and friendly. And obviously he's been here on the show. I don't know how many times.
Sure.
Over the years.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a strange guy. I don't know how to categorize George.
Well, it's just a weird scenario because you are such a Dokken fan, far past the fan level.
Yeah.
To where you would think, Jeff, even though most of your friendship with Don, Jeff was not in Dokken.
True.
But Jeff would know you.
Jeff knows me I'll tell you a quick story about that.
Yeah.
Back in 90, what was it? What year was this? This was 2000 this was 99.
Okay.
1999 when they did Erase the Slate.
Right.
Don called me up and he was just like, hey, we're doing, they were on the Poison's tour. So it was 2000.
Okay.
The second year of when Poison came back, remember they did 99 was Poison, Rat.
It's enough.
No. It was Poison, Rat, Great White, and LA Guns.
Okay.
Second year was Poison, Cinderella, Dokken, and Slaughter.
Okay.
Okay. So Don called me up and he says, hey, we're doing, the Poison tour. Do you want to come out with us for a couple of dates?
Okay.
And I'm just like, yeah, sure, I'll come out. And he says, well, we're doing Grand Rapids, Michigan on Friday. We're doing with Evansville, Indiana.
Okay.
On Saturday, and we're doing Fort Wayne, Indiana on Sunday.
All right.
Okay, so if you want to come out with us, why don't you come out and meet us?
Right.
So I flew to Grand Rapids on Friday.
Okay.
And got on the bus with them. We went to Evansville, and then Fort Wayne didn't sell very well.
Okay.
So they used the excuse, and I can talk about this now,
right.
But they used the excuse for canceling the show that Bret Michaels was sick. Okay.
Doc. Okay.
So and for everybody who's a fan, when you hear these stories that a certain member is sick or they were injured or there's something happened, chances are it's a lie.
Yeah. Low ticket sales.
Yeah. Low ticket sales is usually the answer.
Exactly.
But for some reason, Fort Wayne did not sell very well.
Okay.
Okay. At the time, my then girlfriend was supposed to drive to Fort Wayne on Sunday.
Okay.
Hook up with us at the show on Sunday, and then we were going to drive back home to Ohio, which is, I was living in Akron at the time.
Right.
We were just going to drive back on Sunday and, go back to work on Monday.
Okay.
Well, Bret, because ticket sales were not very good at that time.
You mean his throat? His illness.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
They canceled the show in Fort Wayne.
Boy.
Okay.
I'm sure he was heartbroken by that.
Sure.
His illness kept him from playing.
Well, here's the funny thing.
All right.
So I flew into Grand Rapids on Friday.
Okay.
And I got in there late. And this is the kind of guy that Jeff Pilson is. Jeff is a very, very, very nice person.
He's awesome.
He's extremely nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I flew into Grand Rapids, and Dokken had already left the stage, and Poison was on the stage.
Right.
Well, they had this tour manager. His name is Jack Carson.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's currently Vince Neil's personal tour manager.
Right now he is?
Yes.
Okay.
If you weren't aware of it, and I'm sure most people are, Vince Neil and the rest of Motley Crue do not get along.
What?
Okay. So Vince...
Breaking news.
Right. So Vince has his own personal tour manager.
Right.
This guy, his name is Jack Carson. Okay. His father worked in the music industry for a lot of years. You can look him up. Jack Carson is the guy's name.
Sure.
His father worked in the music industry a lot of years and whatnot. So anyway, during this tour, this was back in 2000, Jack Carson was hired by Dokken's management to be their road manager at the time.
Okay.
So this guy, kind of a dick.
Jack is?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know Jack.
I do. Okay.
Okay.
So he kind of a dick. He's not real personable guy.
Right.
Well, anyway, I fly to Grand Rapids, and I'm on the phone with Don, and I'm just telling him, hey, listen, for some reason my flight was delayed. I don't remember the whole circumstance, but anyway, my flight was delayed, and he's just like, well, you need to get here because we're going to pull out here, within X amount of time and blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
So I arrive at the arena in Grand Rapids. Dokken's bus just left.
Right.
And I'm thinking, holy shit, what am I going to do? I'm here in Grand Rapids of all places, and the bus already left. So seriously.
Jesus Christ.
So I was talking to the Cinderella crew, and because they were on that tour, and they were just like, well, dude, you can grab the bus with us. We're going to Evansville tomorrow too. You can ride on our bus if you want.
Sure.
But
that's nice of them right there.
Yeah, I know.
Cinderella guys are pretty cool too.
Sure. So I'm on the phone with Don. I'm just like, hey, I just got here. Where are you guys at? Well, we just pulled out.
Okay.
And so he apparently told the bus driver, hey, you need to go back. They literally was maybe 2 blocks away.
Oh, nice.
That's how close it was.
Right.
And so they came back around the corner. The bus pulls up. Who jumps out the door first?
This Carson dick.
No, Jeff Pilson.
Oh, nice.
He gets out of the bus, and he's just like, hey, Wendell, glad to see you, man. Sorry we left you. We didn't have a choice. Jack was calling the shots.
Okay.
Right? That's what he told me, right?
Sure.
So I have a suitcase and stuff. He says, don't worry about it, man. We were all waiting on you. We're glad to have you. Jeff Pilson picks up my suitcase.
Right.
There's an under storage thing under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
He opens up the bottom of the bus, stows my suitcase, puts his arm around me, says, come on, dude, we got drinks waiting on you.
Nice.
And I get on the bus and we ride from Grand Rapids to Evansville, Indiana.
Right.
That's how he was. He was the guy who got off the bus and stowed my gear and shit for me.
Right. I don't doubt that.
That's the kind of guy Jeff Pilson is.
Dude, he is. I'll tell my one and only real Jeff story. I mean, I've met Jeff a few times, but when they came through here with Foreigner,
right?
I think it was the first time Foreigner came through that Jeff and Kelly and all those guys were
It feels like the first time, right?
It felt like the first time. It really did. But we had, for whatever reason, you and I had just interviewed Jeff, or you had interviewed Jeff, but I had set something up because he produced one of Veronica's records or something.
Yeah. He did the second one.
Yeah, but it was right at the same time. So I had been in contact with Jeff, and we were trading emails back and forth and whatnot, and at the end of a phone call that we had when I was setting up whatever for the show, he was like, dude, are you a Foreigner fan? I was like, yeah, I love Foreigner. And he's like, give me a call when we come to Cleveland and I'll set up you and whoever you want to go. Just come out and have some fun, right? So I told my neighbors, my neighbors across the street from me are like your typical radio fans.
Sure.
They don't know anything by anybody except what's been on the radio. And when I said that I knew Foreigner, they were like, holy shit, you can meet Foreigner? And I was like, yeah, we can set that up. I know the bass player, and he told me I could, bring whoever I wanted to bring. And, and the etiquette rule, dude, as well as anybody. You don't bring 15 people.
No, you bring one friend or date or whatever. At
most you ask way in advance, can I bring 3?
Sure.
4. 4 total. And 4 is pretty much the top number.
Yeah, you're really pushing it at that point.
Pushing it at 4. But for this one time, my 2 neighbors and the one girlfriend really wanted to go. So I was like, okay, I'm going to ask. And I was honestly going to not go myself. If 4 was too many, I was going to hook them up and not go. Because, again, you know how I am. I don't give a shit. But I called Jeff and I said, I hate to ask for this many tickets, but could you hook me up with 4? He's like, oh, is that all you need, 4? And I was like, yeah, but, I don't like to ask for that. But he's like, dude, I'd have given you 24.
Yeah, it's Foreigner 4.
Well, he was just so nice, dude. And then when we did go, we went, and the meetup was after they played. So they played their set and whatever, and then we go, we get led backstage after. My neighbors are, like the law dog and his buddy. Just
Sure.
totally nervous.
Of course.
Crazy. Jeff could not have been nicer. It was like he was meeting them.
Right.
They were meeting him. He was just like, I'm so glad you guys could come out here tonight. And, it's really a privilege to play these songs for you.
Sure. Sure.
And I was like, Jesus Christ. And then we all sat around on the couch and long-haired Mike was there. That was the free water night.
Yeah, right.
But long-haired Mike was there and we were all just kicking it with Jeff. And he was telling, some cool stories and he was answering every question. And he must have taken 15 pictures with my neighbors. And my one neighbor is a Zepp guy. So he told Jeff, he said, could you point out Jason Bonham?
Right.
And Jason wasn't in the room. So Jeff was like, hold on a minute. And Jeff got up, left the room, found Jason on the bus and dragged him back in so that he could come in and take a picture.
Yeah. Well, he did the same thing for me because Foreigner was touring with Styx.
Right.
And he invited me out to Northerly Islands out here in Chicago.
Sure.
And I went out to the show, and he introduced me to Mick Jones. He introduced me to Jason Bonham.
Right.
We hung out. Then he came here to Porter County Fair, and it was like muddy as hell because it rained the night before.
Sure.
And he invited me back, and we hung out in their bus.
Okay.
And my feet were just full of mud.
Right.
Because it was a fairgrounds.
Right, sure.
And it was just filthy. Oh, don't worry about it, dude. We'll just clean that up. And we hung out on the bus.
Nice.
And my feet were just filthy with mud.
It's funny.
It's like, don't worry about it. We got people to clean that up. Don't worry. Yeah. So I've hung out with Jeff probably, 6-8 times over the years.
Yeah, Jeff's nicer than he has to be.
He is way nice.
Yeah, he's definitely, we know a lot of the good guys, and I'm sure there's a lot of the good guys that we don't know, but Jeff is definitely among the elite of the really nice guys.
Yeah, just overly nice.
Yeah, dude, he's one of those guys, they're out, I'm sure Foreigner's out on tour, and if we called him tonight, he'd make time.
Of course.
He'd be like, yeah, dude, I'm playing the gig, but I'll be done at 10:30.
Yeah, seriously.
He would, and he doesn't have to do that. He could be like, fuck you, I'll do it a week from Tuesday or whatever.
Right.
And he wouldn't. He would totally be like, yeah, dude, if that's what you guys need, I'm more than willing to do it. Good dude, man. Good people.
I like Jeff.
I do too.
So and I busted his balls a little bit about that whole Lynch Pilson thing that what is it?
TNN,
Tooth and Nail,
yeah.
TNN.
Yeah.
And I busted on him a little bit, and he was just as cool as could be about it.
Oh, what's he gonna say? I mean, he could have been mad, but come on, what's he gonna say?
So anyway, Jeff Pilson, one of the elite nice people in the business.
Yep, and because of that, you're always willing to do whatever. He's one that if he's doing anything, you'll help him.
Right.
Because he's earned that. He's earned that by being a respectful guy and not a douche.
Right. And he's a good producer and good musician, and everything he does is just top-notch quality.
Be honest. Don't you wish he was back in Dokken?
Well, of course. He's a very talented guy as far as his obviously he plays bass, but his vocals always complimented Don.
Yep.
And that and again, this goes back to the whole rat thing. Mm-hmm. I know Juan is doing his other voice of rat thing,
right?
Which I think is kind of ridiculous.
Of course.
But Juan's background vocals, just like Michael Anthony from Van Halen,
right?
It's a integral part of the sound.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff Pilson's background vocals, when backing up Don was an integral part of the Dokken sound.
Right.
Yeah. So I agree. Yeah. If it was Don, Jeff, and Mick, and John Levin,
I'd love that.
That'd be the shit.
That would be great. That's all the more reunion I need. And I like George's playing. And I like George as a guy, I guess. I mean, I don't really know George as a guy. I'll just be honest. He's just a guy I interview once a year. But, you know, George can play, but he can't play as good as Levin.
Right. I agree.
Not anymore. And I'm not going to say that back in the day he couldn't. He was fucking number 2. Really?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, most people, don't you think that the list was very short for number 2? It was always Eddie Van Halen number 1. And then you had like Yngwie and Lynch and who else back in that time period? Were they talking about anybody else at that time?
No, it was pretty much it.
Yeah, and just to really depending on what you liked. If you liked the more orchestrated music, you went with Yngwie, but if you liked just more dirty rock, you went with Lynch. But, yeah, Lynch was about as good as it gets at one time, but he got old, you know. Got old and I'm not still, again, he can play. Certainly don't think that he's still not an elite player, but he's not as good as he used to be.
Right.
So, anyway, enough about this.
Right. Well, let's take a short break. I'm going to play one song and we'll come back and we'll finish up the show.
All right.
So I'm going to play something from the Lynch Pilson release.
Okay.
And we'll come back. So here it is. This is Jeff Pilson and George Lynch with Lynch Pilson.
All right.
Exclusively here
On your classic metal show.